The time is just gone 8:37 a.m. as we continue with the broadcast on News and Views this morning. And I must say that this is an absolute pleasure. It's an honor talking with Carl Cowan, award-winning journalist, twice named joint winner of the prestigious Taco Caper Award for investigative journalism, and works at News 24 as part of the in-depth investigative team. And earlier on, we were talking about journalists coming under pressure with what has happened with Karen Bond. But right now, we are talking about the author of the book, and we are talking about sabotage, Eskom under siege, and this has been a major talking point in South Africa. And we have the pleasure of welcoming this morning to the airwaves of Salam Media, author and investigative journalist Carl Cowan. Carl, good morning to you, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, sir, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, sabotage, Eskom under siege, and how often have we heard this word sabotage that is taking place at Eskom against what we've seen, against what Andre de Ruyter has been saying, the revelations that have come through, and you have written this book. You've published this book called Sabotage, Eskom under siege, and just take us through the motivation and what made you actually go and write this book.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. As part of News 24's investigations team, we as a team investigated matters at Eskom, particularly around corruption, Kusile, and published, I think more than 60 articles during the course of 2021. And in that time, I realized that there was this concerted effort to try and, mess up power stations, and also, more importantly, to try and distract the CEO, the now former CEO, Mr. De Ruyter, and the Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Oberholzer, and others from their jobs. There was enormous pressure placed on them through investigations based on spurious allegations. I think they faced something like 8 separate investigations over the course of 2 years. At one stage, the Chief Operations Officer, Jan Oberholzer, spent at least 40% of his working week just responding to investigations. And all of this was aimed at getting rid of them. And I view this and these attempts as an attempt to sabotage them, as an attempt to get rid of them. And in the process, the actual management of Eskom suffered a great deal, because you can imagine if you're busy constantly responding to 20 questions, or 3 pages full of questions by forensic investigators and the SIU, and meeting with policemen over spurious allegations of defamation and all these kind of things, you are distracted, and you are constantly, you feel like you are constantly under attack.
Well, just looking at what has taken place with Andre de Ruyter, and there have always been the sentiment that has been expressed that will he be allowed to do his job without interference? And this is essentially what you are saying, Kyle, that since his appointment, all these investigations that have been taking place, but also at the same time uncovering, and I'm sure we know where we hear the famous saying, where there's smoke, there's fire, and also the revelations that Andre de Ruyter had made, after he had resigned. None of that was seemed to have been taken very seriously, and I'm sure your book covers a lot of or confirms a lot of what Andre de Ruyter has been saying.
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that there's endemic corruption not only at Eskom, but in basically every sphere of government in South Africa is no secret. I think every South African who has ever picked up a newspaper or put on the TV to a news channel is acutely aware of that. We see it every day. When you drive down the street and there are potholes, most probably the reason those potholes are there is because somehow the contract was cooked or thrown, or something bad happened. It's what the only thing that was surprising to me in the reaction to the comments made by Mr. De Ruyter during that ETV interview with Annika Larsen is the reaction by the ANC. The ANC has genuinely tried to pretend that corruption at Eskom is a myth, that the ANC is definitely not, as a party, involved in that, despite the mountains and mountains of evidence to show to the contrary. And I'm not saying that the ANC as a party decided to get involved in deals on a daily basis. They got involved in one very big deal through Chancellor House back in 2007. The party made 97 million rand through its investment company off that deal. We are still feeling the effects of that today with problems at Kusile and Medupi with the design defects in these boilers, which a lot of people disagree on, but I think there's evidence for. And it comes down to whether or not the ANC is, at all believable in its reaction. And I don't think they are, because even if they weren't directly involved in corruption, i.e., the party itself sending people to Eskom to get, to extract money, which we know did happen with the Gupta family, of course, and state capture. The ANC was part of deployments to Eskom that facilitated that grand corruption. But their complicity in it is by not doing anything about it. ANC and political interference at Eskom is one of the main reasons why we still have load shedding today, because sometimes it's good for politics to interfere with operations of a big business like Eskom to correct, to make things better. What has happened at Eskom is that they've only made it far worse than it really needs to be.
Yes, Carl, in fact, I'm just looking at the cover of your book as you speak, and we have people like Andre de Ruyter, we've got people like Cyril Ramaphosa, Pravin Gordhan that are featured on the cover of this book. And this whole question surrounding assault on the power grid and the involvement of the government. And it's just so easy, the whole question surrounding racism that seems to rear its ugly head, because every time something happens, whether there is sabotage, and it's real. We've heard about substandard coal. We've seen that confirmation come through from the Minister of Electricity, although denying there is corruption at Eskom. But the powers that be, people like Pravin Gordhan, people like the President Cyril Ramaphosa that are featured on the cover of the book, obviously are not taking any responsibility from what we've seen, and also coming through in terms of the comments that they have been making as well.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's a difficult thing for an ANC minister and an ANC president to admit major grand scale corruption, not only at Eskom but elsewhere, because then they have to start admitting that the entire system is broken and that they are probably responsible for that. It's not surprising to see, but what is good and what is slightly positive is that in the past sort of 2 years, we have seen the president really change tack on energy related matters. Everything's not perfect. Everything's not great. A lot more can be done. But the president has recognized, first of all, that there's a major problem that requires swift intervention and has gotten the ball rolling, albeit belatedly. And we can have a whole discussion about why it took them so long. But it's at a point where things are on the go now. Decisions have been made that will eventually help the country out of this energy crisis. The question will only, of course, ever be, how good will the policing be of the implementation of those policies? How good will the anti-corruption efforts be to make sure that these deals aren't tainted and therefore then delayed by corruption? It's a very, very fine balance that we have to strike. But this attitude that has previously been adopted by ANC ministers that, oh, you just have to let some people eat just in order for things to go ahead, is arrant nonsense, and it needs to end. Because what happened at Kusile, and the electricity minister, Jose Ramaphosa, has denied that he saw any corruption. Well, of course, because people don't sit around cooking tenders in front of the minister while he's walking around on a pre-planned visit. That's not how it works. And if the minister knew anything about, the procurement system at Eskom, he would understand that, and he wouldn't have said what he said. But it's my feeling that we are seeing movement, and we are seeing a change. Whether that change will be good in the long term, we'll have to wait and see. It's really important that we as South Africans remain vigilant as to what is happening currently with the power stations, whether they're being run hard, whether they're being run according to political instructions rather than what the engineers believe is best.
Also, Carl, you're saying that there is movement, and which is positive, and that needs to happen, because this is no conspiracy theory. This is real. This is the reality that you and I, as ordinary South Africans, are faced with on a day-to-day basis, and a lot that has been playing out behind the scenes or within Eskom are real issues. And it is not only people like yourself that are talking about it. We've seen many others talk about it in the past as well. And that needs to be addressed, because you make this point that uncovering these power struggles threaten the country's very survival, which is being under severe threat at this point in time.
No, definitely. I argue in the book that, there can be no greater threat to the security of our country than Eskom. We have numerous problems in this country. Some of them are massive and, not easy to overcome. But the energy crisis is something that has been predicted since the late 1990s. It is not something that we were unaware of was going to happen, that we didn't know. Government knew. Successive ANC governments were told since at least 1996, 7, 8 that there was a problem coming. It was going to arrive by about 2008. You need to take action to prevent this. They didn't take action in time. They failed to correct. I think, in my view, it was because of arrogance and ignorance that they just refused to listen to other people who may know better than them. And this is a core problem, I think, with much of the policy and ideology that still drives our government. Listening to someone, as a journalist, I don't know everything. I know very little about things, but I make it my mission to go out and speak to people who do know what they're talking about, so that I may understand it, so that I may inform the people who read my stories or read my book. And this is a core tenet, I believe, of why our government is struggling. It's this sort of high morality where they sit on top of a tower somewhere in control of everything that moves and breathes, but they refuse to listen to those people. They refuse to listen to people who know better, who have worked at the coalface of these problems. And then they refuse to change tech. They refuse to change policy quick enough. And that is why we are where we are. If that continues, Eskom represents the single biggest threat to this country's future. If they cannot sort out this energy problem, I am afraid of the consequences of that. This country may not survive in a shape that we recognize or love.
Carl, just finally, as far as the book is concerned, the availability of this book, where is it available, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers?
I believe it is. There's an electronic version on Kindle and so on. You can obviously find it on your online retailers like Takealot. But I believe it should be in almost every bookstore. Every big bookstore, if there are any copies still around. If you do struggle to find one, you're more than welcome to reach out to me via email or Twitter. My information is quite readily available online. Just reach out and we can see if we can make a plan.
Well, I'm definitely going to get hold of this book. I'm old-fashioned. I don't believe in all these online versions. That good hard
Same.
copy in my hand is what I need. But Carl, as always, thank you very much, and we do appreciate you taking time out and talking to us right here on Solar Media. We wish you all the best.
It's only a pleasure, and thank you.
Carl Cowan was us this morning, the author of Sabotage, Eskom Under Siege, and there's just so much that has been uncovered, unpacked in this book. And let us remember that Kyle is an award winning journalist, and it's taken a lot of bravery, it's taken a lot of courage to write this book and to unpack what is termed as one of the biggest crises that this country ever has faced, and which is our power utility, which is Eskom. The time is just gone 8:51. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back.